Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Gig Harbor City Council study session of Thursday, April 27th, 2023. The time is 3:03 p.m. and I will do a roll call. Councilmember Wood,
Here.
Councilmember Storsett. If he's here, if he arrives, we will announce him. Councilmember Rodenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Likens. Here. Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Martin.
Here.
And Councilmember Berber.
Here.
Okay, great. We are changing our agenda a little bit because there are some folks that are coming to our meeting that are stuck in traffic. So we are going to have Katrina give an update and talk to council really quick about something to do with the home court and options there. And then we are going to basically go in reverse order from bottom to top. So second will be annual impact fee reports. Third will be answer to waterfront park fisherman paver replacement project, and fourth will be wastewater treatment plant nutrient optimization update. So just go in reverse order from what's on the agenda currently. So I will turn it over to Katrina to talk about the home court.
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, feel free to jump in if necessary. Council, you'll recall that we applied for a grant through the Port of Tacoma for the home court. They have a total of $200,000 that's available each year for local economic development related projects. We heard from the port yesterday that they would like to fund the city at $150,000. However, there was a condition that they would like to add to our to that funding, which we still don't know if they for sure can or not, but that's another thing. They would like us, if they're giving us the money, to have the floats be available for transient moorage when the fleet is not in town.
Are you aware what transit moorage means in this case?
So similar to what happens at Jersey currently. Jeff and I talked about it. We just as a practice, because in the grant application they did not stipulate that they could put conditions on the funding. And we believe that the application stands on its own for the economic benefits that this will provide. So our initial recommendation would be to say, we would love to accept the money. However, we don't believe that you can condition the grant application. Because we believe this would take further council discussion unless the council today decides that you are okay with that condition being added. If you don't believe that or are not willing today to say that, then we would recommend going back and saying no to that condition.
Can you explain the condition a little bit more?
It was, well, it was very, it was a phone call. It has not been put in writing. And it was from at least one of the port commissioners that, well, yes, if we're gonna give Gig Harbor this money, then they need to add transient moorage onto the floats. We know that this is a very sensitive topic, as the home port has been in discussions for many years, and with the primary purpose being for the fleet. And so, again, hence staff's recommendation that we say we appreciate the $150,000. We would not prefer that condition.
There isn't really, the concern from my point of view about having that condition on, first of all, the application did not say anything about transient moorage, it just was focused on commercial fishing vessels. Let's say in the future, 5, 6, 8, 10 years from now, the council says, you know what, we have so much demand and fishing seasons are changing or adjusting or what have you, fishing vessels are here more and more often. We want to get rid of this transient moorage. Well, then does the port come up and back to us and say, well, no, you accepted $150,000 grant. With that condition, you need to pay it back.
Councilmember Martin.
Who would manage the transient storage? Now, when would they know that it's available for transient?
It would be the city that would have to manage that.
Yeah,
Okay, and are we set up to manage that?
loosely, yes. Not, it would take more staff time to manage that, but not a whole lot. So as you know, at Jersey Dock, there's a self-pay kiosk there. That's essentially what it would be. But the only difference is that Jersey, it's transient moorage only. So it's assumed if there's a spot open, you can come in. The difference is going to be somebody's going to have to manage it to say no transient moorage until the time where transient moorage can be allowed. So commercial fishing vessels come in and out. Sometimes they bring their vessels up to Port Townsend or what have you to do maintenance work.
Mhm.
And if they're gone, the sign needs to be that says no transient moorage. And then, but if they're gonna be gone for leaving for Alaska, they're gonna be gone starting in June and they're not gonna be back until August, that sign doesn't have to be there. And then it can say transient mortgage available. So we're gonna have to figure out, that's gonna be the effort I see us needing to do.
I saw a bunch of hands. Councilmember Likens.
Yeah, it was kind of answered a little bit when I was asking. I was gonna say, how many days a year on average would you imagine that you would need to provide this transient orange? And could we consider saying, we'll try it, you know, as a counter, we'll do this for a year? Or
Our recommendation, to answer that very
Yeah.
bluntly would be that we believe our application stands on its own for the
Sure.
grant criteria
Okay,
that were required without the transient mortgage component.
okay,
If at some later time the city wishes to do that, that would be a whole nother work item that Public
Sure.
Works would need to undertake in terms of power and the pay meter and showers and I don't know,
lots of additional
laundry service
expenses.
that's Gansey. So it's another bit of work that was unanticipated.
So does the port commissioner have evidence of a needs assessment that there is actually a need for that orange? That they're basing
don't
this
know
off
that.
of, or, yeah?
We don't know that.
Okay.
Councilmember Member.
For the council members that were not present during the years that we discussed this, there's some very good arguments why we should not have transient there. And I think the fact that it was in a telephone call instead of a letter says that they're not, and it was from one commissioner. I think that maybe they're not all sold on it. So I think we're safe in going back and standing on our own. The compelling reasons escape me right now, other than $150,000 wouldn't go very far in putting in showers, laundry, and we're not set up for that, infrastructure wise or any other way. So I'm adamant against transient storage. The only argument was that you can get more money for transient storage or mooring than you can commercial. But even that was overwhelmed by the ton of evidence, not evidence, but statements why we don't want. it. So
One of the primary ones was the neighborhood. And
Yeah.
so Jarrett
Yeah.
is around more of a commercial area, whereas Ansich is really around Millville, which is a neighborhood. And
and parking as well. So,
And with the community paddlers dock there now,
right.
there was a lot of safety concerns because the fishermen are more adept. They know how to work with kayakers and other smaller boats, stand-up paddleboards. Whereas people just coming in from anywhere are not, they don't know our traffic flow in the water. They don't, so safety is a big concern for me and was for the council at the time. Councilmember Wook, I saw your hand come up.
Yeah, yes, I'm also feeling the same way about going back to the port and saying, no, thank you. And see if they insist on it, but no, and for all the reasons that have been mentioned here, especially the neighborhood, that transient mortgage was not going to be happening, so hopefully we can go back to them and make that presentation.
Yeah, Councilmember Barber.
I agree. I think it's a really slippery slope. I think on the surface, it seems like it could have some value, but then you start to think about it in the showers and all of that, and it's like, no, this is a fisherman's home port, not a yacht home port. But it seems to me that since one person called you to say, hey, you can have the money, but it seems like we should officially send an email to whoever we applied to, that we accept the money and just do it officially so that we're not going one person to one person, we're going through the channels that we're supposed to go through.
Let me be honest, so the Port of Tacoma hasn't yet approved all of the, they're not grants, low impact development, or no,
economic.
local
Yeah.
development impact fees. They have not approved that, they're getting ready to approve that end of next week. And so it was a phone call reaching out saying, hey, could be coming. I'd like to hear your thoughts, so.
It was topic of discussion amongst those that were reviewing the applications.
Okay,
So I think it's.
so maybe
best
just a
to-
phone call back then.
I
Yeah,
think it's
that
best
makes
to
a
start.
difference.
And then if,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, if it's only approved and that condition is put on there, then we can reply back and say,
Yeah, okay, that makes a big difference, then I would call them back. Yeah,
Councilmember Member.
There was also some stipulations in the grant that we've got to restore the answers that shed,
Mhm.
that it was to be used for education and the public's viewing of fishing, according to fishermen and work, didn't say anything about transient storage. So that could be a factor
Yeah.
as well.
And that's a really good point, and that goes to what we were talking about. If the city were to evaluate this, if it were to be on our work program, there were many things that we would need to consider, and I think we've talked about a lot of them here today that we don't have answers to. So it sounds like council is okay with our recommendation of going back and
Full
saying,
support.
we would like to
Yep.
have our current application considered, nothing more.
Correct.
Great,
Great,
Thank you.
council.
I can
Alright.
say one other thing.
Sure.
There's a number of fishing vessel captains and that are waiting for that home port to be finished, so they won't. I know there'll be a waiting list of people that want more there, so we'll have some lottery or something for that. And not every vessel goes to Alaska at that time of year. And if they have problems, refrigeration or otherwise, they may come back, so it should remain.
It would be a major pain.
Yeah.
we would likely need to consider a harbor master or something like that if we were to go forward with that, which would be another position, which would be another discussion. So
That was my question.
that kind of goes into the point of no, or no.
Okay.
Recommended no. Yes. Okay.
Recommended no,
If
yes.
they only have 200,000 to give away and they're willing to give us 150, then that says they're pretty sold on the home port.
We believe so too.
I think the number this year was actually 250,000 for 2023. Still a large percentage of their.
Thank you for letting us talk with you about this
Yeah.
today.
Okay, so we'll move on to what was item 3, now 2, annual impact fee reports, and this will be our public works director, Jeff Lindholm.
Thank you. So hopefully got a chance to review the 3 impact fee reports. This is an annual task that's from the Public Works Director to provide this information to the public. It was requested a long time ago to start to actually present it formally to the council, so here I am. There's a lot of information, the 3 reports look very similar. It's essentially just a quick summary of the funding and expenditures in 2022, the impact fee revenues for 2022, and then the anticipated ending fund balance. And then a detailed breakdown of where each one of the impact fees came from, which permit paid for them. Park impact fees, transportation impact fees, it's pretty clear cut, those come into the city and then are deposited into the appropriate city funds. School impact fees are a little different. First of all, timing is a little different. We're looking at projects and trying to work with the school district because their budget cycle is different than ours. Of course, it's as noted, it's September 1 through August 31, ours is January to December. So our numbers can be a little bit off because of the way, and we transfer that money over to the school district. We don't take any of it. Every dollar that comes in, that dollar gets transferred over to the school district. And then we just have, it's required by the state auditor for us to provide this report on behalf of the school district because we do take the money in. So a pretty quick, simple report. Happy to modify if you have more information you'd like to see on there. But I just want to present that and answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from council?
I have no question. It's very interesting. Actually, it was.
Okay. Thank you so much.
That was-
That was very quick.
Yeah.
Love it. It's like 1 minute items. These are good. Okay, moving right along to our Ansich waterfront pavement. We may have to do a little chair swap unless. Should everyone?
Should we do?
Or
those
do
first?
you want to go ahead? Is that
Yeah.
okay? Or, you sure? Okay.
Your work.
Okay, well then, one more switcheroo. Okay, so this is gonna be 3, and this is gonna be 4. Okay, so item 1 is now 3, wastewater treatment plant nutrient optimization update. Jeff and Langholm, our public works director, and our consultants, which I will allow you to introduce. Thank you for being here, everybody.
Sure. Yeah, quickly, I'm just gonna do a quick introduction, I'll hand this off to Corolo. But Sam's had multiple discussions with city councils over the past few years about the topic of nutrient reduction due to discharges from wastewater treatment plants throughout Puget Sound, both Salish Sea. Most recently, you, I'm sure recall, March 16th study session, we talked about Puget Sound Clean Water Alliance and the Salish Sea modeling of nutrients. And I mentioned at that study session that we're gonna have a deeper dive into specifically what nutrient reduction, what nutrient generation and treatment, our treatment plant looks like, and what nutrient reduction could look like. So as part of our nutrient general permit from the Department of Ecology, we're required to assess our treatment plant and look for ways to optimize the reduction of nutrients. And remember, when we talk about nutrients, we're mostly talking about nitrogen. So I'm by no means an expert. These folks are, and Chuck, but I'll just hand it off to them. The report that you received is a draft. So if there were questions in there, highlights, red lines, then that's because they haven't made it finalized that. So appreciate your patience, but that's what we had to provide you with. Hopefully gave you a good overview of everything. So if you want, mind introducing yourself.
Okay,
And take it from there.
all right. I'm Tad Giesbrecht with Corollos. I'm the project manager on this project.
Ann Conklin with Corollo, doing the process lead for the project. And then we also have Nick Guco on the Zoom.
So thank you for accommodating your schedule change here. You'll be glad to have Ann presenting these slides, not me. So would I share my screen for that?
Would you put Tad and Google over to? Thank you. Sorry, I should-
You would have to plug into,
No, they're just gonna share via Zoom.
oh, good. Okay,
Doing it, or Google.
I did, but
Oh.
maybe you didn't see the try again.
Okay.
There it goes.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought we were.
Okay. Well, we have a pretty simple agenda here. It's really a two-part series. So it sounds like you're already somewhat familiar with the permit, so we don't want to belabor that point here, but we did include some slides to give a little bit of a background and backdrop before we get into more of the heavy-duty technical analysis. So two-part background, and then Ann will cover the optimization work that we've been doing in the plant. So for the permit itself, just a very quick high-level background here. The whole point of us even doing this work is because the nutrients going to Puget Sound causes algal growth and then depletes the oxygen, increases carbon dioxide, which changes the chemistry of the water, acidification, bad for the environment. So therefore, the Department of Ecology implemented the Puget Sound Nutrient General Permit. It was effective January 1st, 2022, and impacts 58 treatment plants that discharge in Puget Sound. And they've split these into three different categories. There's the dominant, moderate, and small. Gig Harbor is small, and you can see the different plants there along the Puget Sound.
Question on that,
Yes,
are we far from moderate? I mean, we're small, but how much more would it take to push us up into the moderate? I mean, we like way down in the priority list, or are we close to moderate? Just based on our size and perhaps even future expansions.
I think they looked at total loading from each treatment plant, nitrogen output, and then there seemed to be sort of a natural break into those three categories. Exactly where Gig Harbor fell within that, I don't know. My guess would be somewhere in the middle of the small, maybe a little bit closer to moderate,
Okay,
somewhere in that.
so it's based on the nutrient loading.
That's right.
Not the just total outfall, like 200,000 gallons a day, right? So it's just the loading. Okay,
Somewhat output is loading us, yeah. So this permit is really structured for a 5-year chunk here. So starting in, like I said, 2022, that gets us through 2026. And there are really 4 elements of this permit. The first is focusing on optimizing what you already have. So it's not focused on capital improvements. It's trying to get the best treatment you can with what you've already got. Part of that is monitoring what's coming in, what's going out, and then some level of planning, which is kind of what we started here as part of this project. They also talk about grant funding, which sounds good. So we called the ecology before this to see what exactly that meant. There wasn't a whole lot that they offered there at this time. Did mention that there was not additional grant funding identified just yet, but of course, they're looking for that. They do expect that there will be more money than usual run through the state revolving fund program, or whatever that's worth, but we'll certainly be monitoring that. There are appeals and legal actions on the permit, and we have not listed those all here, but just highlighting that there are a couple of stays, which means that that element of the permit is not going to be enforced. And the first one doesn't even apply to small loaders, but there's a stay in there regarding action level exceedance corrective actions. All that means is if you go over a certain action level, then you have to do other actions. That's a stay on the permit right now, but doesn't even affect a permit. The one that does more directly affect us is the source control review and actions. And that's basically assessing what's coming in the door, where your major sources of nitrogen. So it's not like we've ignored that through discussions. It doesn't seem that the city has any of those major contributors. But as per the permit and stay, we're not formally assessing that. This is a overview graph of the next 5 years, a little bit more detail now. So for the city's focus, you're really operating on the top blue band, which is the optimization effort that we're working on. And as you can see on the top there, by the end of last year, we needed to select an initial optimization strategy, which the city has done. And then that transitions to implementing that strategy, which would happen over this year and probably into next. And then if we bump down another row, kind of an ongoing assessment is that monitoring piece of seeing what are the nitrogen loads coming in and going out. And then eventually assessing how well your optimization strategy did. So did it achieve what we thought it was going to achieve? Good question.
Mind if I ask a
Yeah,
question?
please.
Oh, thank you. So the question was, if I recall, Jeff, you were saying that we don't have data to show where all the materials are coming from. And so the Department of Ecology said, well, the one thing that we can have some jurisdiction over was all of us cities and counties, et cetera, that have wastewater treatment plants, if I would call that conversation correctly. So once we get the data from all of those, what was it, 58 different sites? And is there a way to say, okay, out of all of us who have wastewater treatment plants, say we contribute 25% of the nutrients, and then there's 75% coming from someplace else. Is that, in your opinion, are we doing that, one, to say how much nutrients are coming from us as cities and stuff? And the second question is, if we find that we're not the major contributor, do we think there's going to be any changes to what's required of cities to do for nutrients? Does that make
I
sense?
think so.
Okay.
And you'll add to this, but I think to answer your first question, the ecology has been monitoring what's been going out for each plant for a while.
Okay.
And so and in fact, there's a website, a GIS-based website you can click on and see exactly what they're showing in their records for your nitrogen load. So that is known, but I think at this point, the way this seems to be going is that regardless of what percentage you're at, the point is that they're continuing the modeling, and that actually is a good point here. We look at this lower bar, which is kind of purple on this screen. What is ecology up to at this point? So they're continuing to model, which you're aware of through the Puget Sound Institute, to develop the WLAs, which is waste load allocations for different parts of Puget Sound. And once that's established, then they would move towards developing WQBELs, water quality based effluent limits.
Why wouldn't they?
Why would- Exactly, the natural
It
progression.
would be very good, WUFBELs too.
You can just call those QBells or something, but it's basically taking, okay, the Puget Sound can handle this much nitrogen in this area, and then carving that up into specific limits for each plant based on the contribution. Does that make sense?
Nope, makes perfect sense.
Okay.
And I think you had a question.
No, go ahead.
So, yeah, good question. So now we're on to, this Xed out nitrogen reduction measure. That was part of the permit, but there's a stay. So for now, that's not a requirement. So that's the main focus for the city right now. Now, this next bar down, ACART analysis, got all these acronyms, all known and reasonable treatment processes. May be another study that's required, depending on a couple things. Number one, if you exceed 10 milligrams per liter, we're going to talk about these numbers in a second. So that's one threshold in the effluent. The second is that if you demonstrate increased loadings of nitrogen, that triggers ACART. Right now, just to cut to the chase, you don't meet any of either of those. So that's why it's a dashed cross out, because at some point it may be required, but right now we're not seeing that it would be. Okay. Now, just to highlight for you, in the next 5 years, kind of the main things that we'll be looking at. Developed an optimization plan, we have drafted that, which is really what we're going to highlight here today. And then going into the rest of this year is implementing the preferred optimization strategy. This second bullet around ACART is continuing to monitor those two conditions and then communicating with ecology about what we're seeing to confirm that ACART indeed is not required. If it is required, fast forwarding a little bit, it's due the end of 2025. So at some point you have to make the decision, we got to do ACART or not, to give yourself time to do that analysis. So that'll be a continual monitoring. Into 2024, again, is assessing how well we've done with the strategy and adjust if necessary. 2025 is update the optimization plan based on all the monitoring that we've been doing. And then that plan is needs to be submitted by March of 2026. So we've got time to get to that main submittal. Now, again, if ACART's required, that's in 2025. This is my last slide, just to kind of wrap this part of it up, or the background. We're in the permit cycle 1, which we just talked about. Just looking ahead a little bit into 2027, and then for the next 5 years would be the next cycle. And that's again where we expect that there will be nutrient limits set for each treatment plant, which would then trigger more specific planning as to how you're going to get to those numbers. And then at some point doing the design to go along with that. That sets the stage for the next permit cycle 3, starting in 2032, which is where they highlight that they would expect upgrades are happening. So that's where the capital spending maybe would occur. Now, took this from the college's website, but as you probably have already seen, that's in flux. This is kind of how they're describing it at this time. So with that, unless there are any questions, oh yeah, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
had a question on the prior slide. The R and ACART
Yeah.
is always the one to talk about what's reasonable, what ecology thinks is reasonable, and what we make reasonable. Becomes the negotiation, or they just say, this is reasonable. Because that's subjective, that's,
Yeah. Yeah, that R should be in bold, and that's gotta be part of that.
Yeah.
If you look at this middle band on ACART analysis, you can see the types of things that they are asking you to look at. And one of those is the economic evaluation, affordability. And so I think there's probably 2 parts to the R. One is we expect at some point that we're gonna get more guidance from their view as to how to define R. That's one thing. But there seems to definitely be leeway for each city to define what R means for Gig Harbor. And affordability, I just highlight that because that's gotta be part of that R, I would think. So, and you're.
Well,
those two.
Yeah, the ecology has hired an economist to help define what the guidelines for.
Great.
What we think reasonable means, but they are also encouraging the cities that are moving forward, so the dominant loaders. Well, you're not in this category because your effluent is so good, but there's several utilities that are moving forward with the analysis now. And they are recommending that you be in communication with them and just, determine how you're gonna define reason.
Yeah, Councilmember Wood?
Yes, thank you. So right across the bay in our harbor, we have septic systems that probably have an influence in what's happening to the bay. Is this measured only at our wastewater treatment plant, or is it measured in the bay? Where is the measurement taken for the nutrients?
Yeah, so there are really two measurements. One is very specific to the treatment plant discharge. So that's one number. But ecology is also assessing, at least at some level, those non-point sources like septic tanks and ag runoff that are rich in nutrients. And so like that website that I mentioned also has data that they've captured for different non-point sources in different rivers that are contributing to Puget Sound. So that's a separate data set, if you will.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councilmember Martin?
Yeah, I know quite a few years ago, King County had a big flood in their wastewater treatment center. And I don't know if that was King, I think it was a huge storm, and they just didn't have their system set up right. And I don't know if we're in jeopardy with climate change of that, with the potential of that happening for us, but I'm guessing that those nitrates could go out, or nutrients could go out, that could be impacting our numbers. We might have a big spike during a situation like that and then bring it down. Are they accounting for any of this, or for an emergency or something, something that we just couldn't, yeah.
One time
Right.
Yeah.
Based on the average.
Yeah, they're defining it based off of the annual average right now, so you do have some ability if there was a process upset, or if you had a massive overflow or an emergency, you have the rest of the year to kind of average back in, yeah.
That's it for questions right now, I think.
All right, so this will transition us to Ann and you wanna.
Okay, so I just wanted to start with your treatment plant has historically, it continues to do a really good job removing nitrogen. This graph is showing the effluent total inorganic or TIN concentration from 2017 to 2022. The data points, the blue data points are the individual measurements that are submitted to ecology, and that black line is the rolling 365-day average. And we've done that because that's how ecology is looking at it on an annual average basis. The line in green is highlighting 10 milligrams per liter, and we're showing that because that is one of the criteria for whether or not you're going to need to do the ACART analysis. And as you can see, before the permit started, you were under 10. In the first year of the permit, you're still under 10. So you guys are doing a really good job at your wastewater treatment plant. Regardless, the permit does require that all of the utilities optimize their treatment process. So even though you're doing a great job, we still have to look at ways to make it even better. So just before getting into how we can optimize the treatment process, I wanted to do a quick overview of how wastewater is treated at your treatment plant. So the wastewater from the collection system comes in. Oh, wait, no. There we go. And the first thing it hits is the aeration basin. There are portions of the basins that are unaerated. These are anoxic zones. And there are portions of the basins that are aerated. These are the aerated zones. In our aeration basin, this is the workhorse of the treatment plant. This is where we're reducing biochemical oxygen demand or BOD. We're reducing ammonia and nitrogen. So this is where a lot of the transformations happen. In addition, we are growing bugs. We're growing microorganisms. These are the vehicles for transforming the BOD and the nitrogen. So the biomass that grows in the aeration basin then goes on to secondary clarifiers. These are big tanks where we really slow down the water and we allow it to settle. So all the biomass that grew in the aeration basins, we take over to the secondary clarifiers and let it settle out. We have clean effluent coming off. And that goes to disinfection and then to your outfall. And as we saw in the previous graph, you're routinely getting effluent TIN less than 10 milligrams per liter with this process. Now, the biosolids that generate are grown in the secondary treatment, the aeration basin, and settle out in your clarifiers. They have two fates. A large majority of them are coming back here to the aeration basin to make sure that we have enough biomass to keep the process going. A portion of the biomass, though, goes on to be wasted into your solids treatment process. For Gig Harbor, this consists of thickening, aerobic digestion, and dewatering. And the whole aim of this process is to reduce the volume of solids that you're generating, reduce the mass of solids that you're generating, and then also stabilize the solids to some extent. And that helps reduce odors. Then once you go through dewatering, the solids are hauled off site, and the thickening and dewatering return go back to the aeration. So that's kind of in a nutshell how wastewater is treated at your process. So then if we want to focus in on how does your process reduce nitrogen? So generally speaking, nitrogen reduction is a two-step process, simplifying this to some extent. And the first step is the conversion of ammonia to nitrate. So the ammonia that enters in your influent, and then the ammonia from your dewatering return hit the aeration basin. And when they get to the aerobic zone, they are oxidized to nitrate by the nitrifiers. But in order to remove nitrogen, we got to get rid of that nitrate. And so that's happened in the second step. And this kind of is where it goes backwards. So that first unaerated zone is where the nitrate is converted to nitrogen gas. And the effectiveness of that conversion really depends on how much nitrate you can get back to that unaerated zone. So you've got two ways at your treatment plant to get the nitrate back. We've got the solids return from the secondary clarifiers that brings back nitrate. And then we also have this pumped return, which allows you to send even more nitrate back to the anoxic zone to even do a better job of reducing nitrogen. So that's how your treatment plant reduces nitrogen. But even though it's working great, there are several knobs we can turn to see if we can make it do even better. So the first one is looking at, can we reduce the amount of nitrogen that's hitting your treatment plant? So this bullet one right here. This is part of the stay, as Tad mentioned, but also there's no big industry in the Gig Harbor service area. Don't have big septic sources that are contributing nitrogen. So there's not too much that we can do with bullet one on the nitrogen coming in from the collection system. Bullet two down here is, well, we in addition to the nitrogen that's coming in your inflow, we also have nitrogen that's coming back as recycled. So is there a way that we can reduce the nitrogen coming back in the recycle, and that will help reduce your effluent nitrogen load? So that's one knob that we can turn. The next one is if we focus in on this aeration process, so the conversion of ammonia to nitrate. If we can ensure super effective conversion of ammonia to nitrate, then we can improve the efficiency of the whole process. That's another knob. If we look over here at the anoxic zone, this zone works really well when it has no oxygen. So if there's any way that oxygen is getting back into that zone, that will decrease the efficiency and decrease your nitrogen removal. So another knob that we can turn is to really protect that zone and make sure that the little oxygen is getting in as possible. And then the final step is this nitrate return here. So this is where we are resending nitrate back, and we can really optimize how much nitrate we send back for your treatment plant, how many zones are in service. And this will help allow us to really dial in the nitrogen removal. So that's another way that we can optimize the treatment process. So with all of these options in mind, we met with the city to discuss goals of the optimization and to select an alternative optimization strategy. So goals that we discussed were improving the nitrification efficiency. I mentioned that this was one knob we could turn to help improve the efficiency of the removal process. And also there are periods during the summer when nitrification is not stable. And so the city is hopeful that through these optimization strategies, we can improve effluent nitrogen concentration and just improve the stability of your process overall. That would be kind of a win-win. A second goal is more obvious, I guess, but you're to continue to produce high quality effluent with low TIN concentrations, stay below 10 milligrams per liter, and have optimization as a way to counter any increase that you might have from population growth. If you are able to do that, then you don't have to do the ACART analysis, and that would also be open for the city. So those are two goals that were identified. We've discussed several different strategies that we could look at to reduce the nitrogen in your effluent. The two that really we felt had the most impact, I'm showing on the screen. The first is through aeration optimization. So there are periods of time in your aeration basins when they are under aerated. And so during these periods of time, not enough oxygen is getting to the aerobic zone. We don't have complete conversion of the ammonia to nitrate. There are also periods of time, conversely, when that aerated zone during low loads is over aerated. So too much oxygen is going in. You're getting great conversion of ammonia to nitrate, but now you've got so much oxygen that you're sending it back in that pumped return to the anoxic zone, and you're sending oxygen to the zone. So now that anoxic zone is less effective. In addition, with your current setup, you cannot cycle the air in your aerobic digesters. So right now, an aerobic digester with adequate aeration would be able to convert the ammonia to nitrate. If you had cyclic aeration, you can turn off the air for periods of time and allow the nitrate to go to nitrogen gas just naturally in the aerobic digester. But with your current setup, you don't have that ability. So that was one strategy, was if we can optimize the aeration system, we might be able to address all of these bullets, 3, 4, and 2, and help get to a lower effluent nitrogen concentration. The second idea that we looked at was to modify the anoxic basins to allow you to operate with more than one in service. So right now, the city operates with one anoxic basin in service, because if they operate with more than one, then they have no control over the flow split. And it becomes very difficult to operate the basins. Yeah.
How many anoxic basins do we have currently? We have one or three? Three, okay.
Yeah.
But right now you can only use one, but you can't control the air flows, correct?
Yeah, can't control the split
Right.
between the
Yeah,
basins.
between the basins.
So if we were able to modify the basin so that the city could operate with 2 or 3 in service, then that might be another tool that they would have to more efficiently remove nitrogen. So that was another strategy we discussed. The city selected to move forward with aeration optimization as the selected approach for the initial optimization strategy. In addition to reducing the effluent nitrogen, this optimization strategy also had the benefit of saving energy. So if we can reduce the amount of time that we are over aerating the aeration basin, then it's good for the process, but it's also good for operation costs as well.
So we skipped 5, and not skipped it, but city didn't decide to do that. Was that just due to cost alone? To modify the anoxic basins?
I think the city is still interested in pursuing that option. As the initial strategy that the city wanted to focus on, it was the aeration optimization. But this is, it would be nice if the city had the ability to operate with more than one basin.
So it isn't off the table. That's right.
Councilman Martin.
So we will implement these strategies, then get a baseline, is that the thinking? And then see how that progresses with these strategies, and then see if it makes sense to go to 5 and when it makes sense to go to 5.
Yep, exactly.
Is there anything that sometimes not us, of course, when government entities set out goals for us to reduce things, sometimes there's an unintended negative consequence. Is there any unintended negative consequences to doing this work that we're not aware of that could potentially happen? I'm just thinking of gases and things that we're gonna put in the air, so we're trying to clean up the water, but maybe there's other things that might.
It's a good question. I think the consequences that we are seeing is there's a cost that is being incurred by the city to do this work. On the next slide, I'll highlight the activities that the city has done in 2022. The aeration optimization strategy, has a lot of benefits to it. And not a lot of negatives. I think that the main negative is that to really optimize the process is gonna take some capital. The city was already thinking about doing this anyway, since it was a need the city had identified. But it's gonna take some money to fix the piping, to allow you to have the flexibility to aerate your system the way you want to.
Is that when you say it's gonna cost capital, is that to do number 5?
No, this is
No,
just
all of
for
it.
this aeration optimization. It's gonna take some money in order to do that.
Okay.
So that's, in my mind, that's the main downside, is just that it's gonna cost something.
I think that, even though we're under the nutrient level now, when we do things like this, ecology pays attention to it. And they're looking at the heavy duty guys, but when we show effort to improve a good system ahead of time, before it's mandated, it really goes a long way further down the road. And to your point, Councilman Martin, what goes in the air, or sometimes it's called odor. I can assure you that Kroll engineers are experts at odor control and wastewater. Because I worked with your company for many years in Southern California and at the biggest plants in the country. So I can tell you we're in good hands.
And it's not in the report, but I mean, and we'll do it. We're at a point in the life of this treatment plant where we have to look at doing some maintenance on this air system. Specifically the diffusers, they're reached the end of their life almost. And so it's a good time to, before we go in, and we could have just last year gone and replaced all the diffusers. And we'd have to go back and say, oops, maybe we shouldn't have done it just that way. We've got another reason and so we've held off, but it's not ideally to operate like we have been, but the staff has been making it work. But now we can come in, be able to check the box, and it's not, like I said, not necessarily in the court. We had to do a lot of this anyway, and college doesn't know it, but we're gonna do this all at once, and we're gonna also, by the way, get our maintenance done that we needed to do some improvement or some good maintenance, capital improvements of the tree.
Right. So this slide is just highlighting the implementation activities that occurred in 2022. So that's the first year of the permit cycle, something that we'll want to be tracking each year of the permit. So in 2022, the city reached out to Neuros, which is the manufacturer of the blowers, with this to provide assistance in how to modify the piping and the valves to allow the city the flexibility they wanted. We've also reviewed those drawings. The city began tracking the performance of their aerobic digester. So I mentioned previously, so in an aerobic digester, we have with the air, it's going to function very similar to the aerobic zone of your secondary treatment process. We should be converting ammonia to nitrogen. What the city has observed is high ammonia concentration coming out of the aerobic digester, and that's not what we would anticipate with an aerated system. So the city purchased some probes, they did some extra sampling, and they found periods of time when the dissolved oxygen concentration at the digester is lower than what we wanted. So the city looked at increasing the air to the aerobic digester and ran into some problems that alluded to. So those were kind of the implementation activities of 2022, starting the process and how to modify the blower system, figure out what's going on with the aerobic digester, and then kind of starting on the path on how to fix the aerobic digesters.
So on your graphs, that's what you call the optimization period, when the city went in and added some more aeration in there. And that's why some of the data is showing that it may not have done a good job.
Well, yes, and for this slide, I've changed the nomenclature a little bit because it's confusing. What Ecology considers as your optimization period is it's starting on January 1st, 2022. But that's really unfair because you are also selecting your preferred optimization strategy in 2022 and you are working on implementing it. So in reality, the Diggerberg hasn't fully implemented the optimization strategy. You're working towards it, but it's not fully implemented yet. So on this graph, what I'm showing here, I'm calling it like the first year. So this is year one of your nutrient general permit, starting here. But here we go, with that blue line right here. But in reality, you're still operating the same system that you've had. So we mentioned on the previous slide, your beginning of this section, your effluent TIN concentration is great. It was great, it still is great. Between 2017 and 2021, these are the pre-optimization. So this is the period when Ecology was asking you to monitor, but there was no nutrient general permit in place. The average concentration ranged from a low of 6.2 in 2020, to a high of 8.1 in 2018. And then in 2022, your average concentration was 5.6. So even though you didn't have your optimization strategy fully implemented, the city did an awesome job operating the treatment plant with what they had, and were able to produce an effluent that was even cleaner than what it was before. This is the same information, but now it's on load. So the Ecology is tracking concentration, load, and removal percentages. So this is the same story. Between 2017 and 2021, your average load ranged from a low of 55 in 2020 to a high of 72 in 2018. In 2022, your average load was 56. So it's within the range of what you saw during that pre-optimization period and kind of on the low side. So again, doing a really, really good job. What we're looking for.
How come the yearly average would be slightly higher? Is it because we're processing more? If this is just pounds per day, that also then, if your influent is more, you're putting out more pounds per day, whether you can fix it or not. So is that one of the reasons that there was more influent, because there's more loading going out?
Absolutely, that's a good observation. So you had, in 2022, their influent nitrogen load was greater than what you saw in 2017 through 2021. But the plant, you guys did a really good job and removed more nitrogen than you had previously, so your effluent load didn't go up.
So that's really good, right? Because we were right in this COVID and those other corresponding years, we probably had more people using the system.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
In 2019, 2020.
Interesting.
And what Ecology is gonna look for is the load increasing? Are you seeing an increase in load? And for the small loaders, it's not defined at all. In our conversations with Ecology, one of the metrics that they said that you could look at was, what was the range that you saw before the optimization started? And if you're within that range, then you could probably show that no increase in load. So that's why I was focusing on the 2017 to 2021 range was 55 to 72. You're in that range. With the first year of the permit, I don't see any evidence that you have an increase in nitrogen load. So that's good news. If that can persist, then maybe the ACART analysis will be required. And the final thing that Ecology an additional thing Ecology is tracking is your removal percentage. In order to calculate that, you need influent and effluent nitrogen. So there's only 2 years of data, 2 years when that's available, 2021 and 2022. And this just gets back to what we've been talking about. 2021, the average removal was 78%, really, really good. And in 2022, it was even better. So even though the optimization strategy wasn't fully implemented, the city was still able to do a really good job reducing nitrogen.
If you were to put fit a line through there, you'd see it going up. We're actually taking out more. You can just get an average, okay, that's great, but if you put a trend line, and I kind of did that on the thing, and it shows it going up, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's considered a good percentage? You say really good.
Well, so my experience in Puget Sound is plants. There's no removal, historically, there was no removal of nitrogen required. So a lot of plants don't remove anything at all, it's zero. You're not in that boat, I mean, and there, it's, for those treatment plants, this is a major big deal. In order to remove nitrogen, you first have to provide a long enough retention time for those nitrifiers to grow, and they're slow, they don't wanna grow at all. So, you know, treatment plants are looking at like having to double the amount of biomass they normally maintain, like it's a super, super, super big deal. And that's why, so when I look at your performance, you're doing great, it's really, really good.
I think that shows where the city invested quite heavily in that plan, and we're all paying for it, but I think we're seeing the results here too, which I think is a positive thing to note.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's a thing to note for future budgets, right? For people who, you know, might be new to this, or we have short-term memories sometimes, that as we're looking at things and what we spend money on, and sometimes we may not have money, that we have to understand the consequences if we don't continue to invest in that. What, you know, how much should we invest so that we're not penalized and then we're paying more than we would have it for the taking care of it.
For the benefit of doing it now and not later at a higher cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, or penalties that we don't, I mean, that's wasted money in my opinion.
I appreciate that point, Councilor Martin, because we are going to be talking about utility rates coming up.
Tell you to say
Council discount.
I think I've got one more slide. Just wrapping up the 2022 and direction for 2023. So as I mentioned, your upload's looking great. It's possible that ACART's not gonna be required. We'll be monitoring that for the next couple of years and be in communication with ecology. That's what up in the air for me. Like, how do you know when you can say it's not required?
What's an estimated time to do that work and cost? Just give a ballpark on there, if we had to do the A-card.
So we are in our schedule, we've been thinking about this from the standpoint of when does the city need to make the call on doing ACART or not doing ACART? How long would it take? And if it's due at the end of December, I think you wanna at least be working on it in January. Like, I think it's at least gonna take a year. That would be kind of the minimum on how long it would take. In terms of how much it would cost, I'm not.
Throw that one to me.
Yeah, I'm.
So I think we should take a break right now.
Second that.
We won't hold you to it,
Big,
but just.
big cities, and I won't name names, are doing some of these studies on the order of $1 million of nutrient reduction evaluation, full ACART analysis. That's a different scale than what we're talking about here. So I would say less than 500,000,
Okay, thank you.
something on that order.
That's just for a study
Yeah.
to come up with.
Yeah.
what needs to do,
Right.
The actual solution might be.
And a lot of this runs together a little bit with facility planning in general. So to know what's reasonable, you kind of need to know what you might have to do, which means you have to do some planning, which means you have to do some more pre-design type of engineering to lay it out to see the impacts of it. So that type of study does take, it's not just necessarily arm waving cost estimating, you're basing it on site layouts and technology selections.
So are we limited, Jeff, on space there? If we had to add either another aerobic basin or even worse, an anaerobic digester that space wise, I mean.
Yeah, it's tight. I'm not sure.
Yeah, our footprint is very tight.
Right.
You know, in the original upgrade design, we've got a spot for a building if we ever wanted to go to membrane filtration.
Right, okay.
But other than that, it's very tight. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. You just bought that forest next door.
Oh,
It's already been cleared, so.
Right. Another break.
City Administrator, no, I was just gonna say for the record that Councilmember Rodenberg was Jody.
Thank you for that clarification, City Administrator Knudsen.
That was a fascinating presentation.
Very
It's
good.
the best I've ever heard. It makes me wonder. It needs a
That's why we
song.
hired them.
I was thinking Schoolhouse Rock or something.
Do you
It's
need,
like this
do you need some employees? I think we're all ready to go now.
So there were 3 questions at the end of your report. I wasn't sure that you had answers, but I didn't know what the questions were, so.
Oh, and thanks. And so the report that we drafted is the template. So this is something that's due March of 2026. So it's got a
Okay.
long time. If you've got comments, we've got years to incorporate them. But it's easier to do these things when they're fresh in your mind. So I think I wanted to document what was done in year 1, that you selected an optimization strategy when you're required to, you began implementing it when you're required to, and this is something that we can update each year. In the nutrient general permit, the ecology lists the questions that you have to answer when you submit your optimization report, and this is something that the cities will do online, and the questions will pop up. We just went through this with the city of Bellingham. And so the questions will pop up, and depending on your answer to that question, additional questions might pop up. So I went through for the small loaders and looked at the questions, and basically there was 3 questions that they wanted you to answer, which was, what is your optimization strategy? And you've got the documentation for that. Was your effluent TIN less than 10? The answer is yes. Did you see an increase in loads over the period so far? The answer is no.
Okay.
And if you answer those 2 questions the way they want is not the right answer, but if your effluent's less than 10 and you're not showing a load, then they say you're done. You don't have to answer any more questions. So there's like 20 questions for small loaders, but at this point, we only need to provide answers for 3. And so for the city, I wanted to provide, like for Bellingham, what we did is, here's the answer to each one of the questions. This is what you can paste into the cell when you submit your report. So I wanted to kind of start that format for you, so you knew what you would be pasting into the boxes when you submitted the report online.
So the last question is sorry.
Oh, no.
The last question is, I know that you guys tried some stuff, blowers, and it said it failed. So right now, the wastewater treatment plant is operating as it was before any of this, basically.
Basically, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's a great segue for the plan for 2023 is to work on those aerobic digesters and being able to get more air into them. That's where,
replace them with something better than what we got.
well, at this point, not the digesters, but replacing the diffusers so
Right,
that we can
yeah.
get more air into those basins. We can try to convert the ammonia to nitrate, and then if it hits the anoxic zones, it can be converted to nitrogen gas in your secondary system as it is. So that's kind of step 1 for 2023. The other step is to finalize those plans to modify the piping and valves for the air blower system, so you can really more efficiently aerate your system. So those are the plans for 2023.
Where does the solid waste go?
I know, it's a little.
Where does it go?
Yeah.
We haul it to 2 different places.
I'm kind of full of it, so no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
We haul it to 2 different places, Natural Selection Farms in Sunnyside, Washington. And they land apply it to dry wheat, winter dry wheat fields. And then, we just signed on with Olympic Ag out of Montesano a couple of years ago. And so we started hauling there as well. And during the spring, early summer.
And do we pay for that?
Silence yourself, everyone. I forgot to say that at the beginning.
Very different direction.
I know, really.
It's really sad, isn't it? I gotta get over that. Here we go. It's silent mode too. I don't know why.
You or somebody else?
No,
That was my council phone. My apologies about that. Do we pay for it, or do they pay for it, or what's the economic?
You do pay for it. It's a very expensive part of our process. I think, don't quote me on about that. We're right around $175,000 to $200,000 a year
Wow.
that we spend to dispose of.
And we just reduced that by changing
We would take it.
By adding, okay,
By anything, it's somewhat, lighter on the cost, but not significant,
So in our budget, do we have a line item for the improvements we might be looking at for 2023?
it was under wastewater operating, yeah, there is, and you'll see that as another line item in our utility rate study for
Okay,
sewer operating, yeah.
And we did budget some money in there,
Yeah.
for this year, next year as well, for
Right.
digester upgrades, our air header system. Which, again, that's that process right there, I think if we could move forward on that and reduce the ammonia side stream return back to the plant, that would be a big win for us. And so you'll probably be hearing from us again, asking the team up for all those jump into that one and move forward with designing upgrades for that.
Right, I think maybe we can give everybody chemistry credits for today, maybe.
Environmental.
It made sense to pay attention just a little bit in class, right?
I didn't take that class. That's why I did.
Well, and this just shows, so Ecology sent a letter that the treatment plant is being awarded for the 6th consecutive year, but overall like 18 years of awards, I think, or 20 years. Yes, and so they're beginning to receive a plaque again for another year of excellence, and so we're so proud of them and all the work that they do. If you haven't toured the plant, you really should. You can go see the trucks kind of filling up with that stuff that they haul away. It's pretty cool.
That stuff.
That's, yeah, you just say stuff, but it's
I have a birthday coming up, maybe that's how I'll spend my day.
it's fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
And if you go the year, it's even more fascinating. Yeah.
You did a great presentation.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much. That was very informative and
Sorry, I was.
No, we understand the traffic.
Yeah, that's great.
Somebody should do something about
Yeah.
That's what our house.
Actually, one last question. If the stay gets lifted on the influent analysis, are we spun up for that, or do we have to kind of start from scratch, or how do we? I don't know when the stay is going to be lifted. I have no idea, but at some point it probably will be, because that's certainly one
Yeah,
equation.
it's not, we can do that analysis. It's not for Gig Harbor, there's not a lot.
Right.
I don't see it being lengthy. Going through a survey of the industrial sources that are coming into the plant. How much nitrogen do we think they're bringing in? Is any one of them really significant? No, that's, at this point, we don't think there are any significant sources there. So I do not think it will be too onerous once the stay is lifted for that analysis.
Do you think there's ever time they're going to start looking at pharmaceuticals on our effluent?
I think that is always something that is in the news, always something that is being considered. So there's always a hot something that we are worried about right now. Our industry is worried about PFAS.
Yeah.
Forever chemical.
Microplastic, that's another one that we're
Yeah.
worried about. They're too big. Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much. And council, why don't we take a 5-minute break while they get their stuff together, and then come back at 4:16.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Gig Harbor City Council study session of Thursday, April 27th, 2023. The time is 4:19 p.m. We are on our last agenda item, which is Ansich Waterfront Park Fisherman Paver Replacement Project. And this report comes to us from our Parks Manager, Jennifer Harrell. Hi, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor. And first off, I want to say thank you so much to Chris Green for being so patient. I told him to log on at 3:30. So,
Thank you,
I was
Chris.
way off. Oh, and, so he is a Premier Memorial. So he can answer any of your granite related questions because I don't know many answers to that. And then I also want to acknowledge Randall Babbage in the back there, who is the proponent of this project for the Fisherman's Club. So when we last met March 2nd, you had asked for a few more color samples and some pricing for the rest of the pavers. So Chris's company was able to give us a quote for $52,697 to replace all of the pavers, not just the ones that had etching, fisher boats, in them. So, Jeff and I also looked, I can share my screen if you want, but this is part of the packet that, or your packet, and Chris had submitted that to Mr. Babbage. Jeff and I looked at it and we asked for some quotes on 3 different ones. And for reasons I don't quite understand, but hopefully Chris can explain. A lot of them that are not the proposal, which is down there on the floor, are a lot more expensive. And it has something to do, you can explain a little bit more, but with quarries and shipping and amount of available stone. So yeah, and some of the colors, they range from 71,000 to replace all the pavers, to 82,600, whereas the original one was 52. So, what we are hoping for today is a decision on whether we will accept the donation from the Fisherman's Club as proposed with just the etched tiles replaced. I also included in your packet kind of a schematic of what it would look like layout wise. So as proposed, or replace all of the pavers, look at a different kind of paver, or decline the donation. So if you choose to take a donation, it will still come before you in a regular meeting. And we'll get a contract in place and all that.
Just to remember, is that the color that's being proposed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And that's the color that is 52 to replace all the pavers.
All the pavers.
Or basically 26, because the 52 included the original etched pavers as well. And it's not 52,000 just to replace what the city wanted, plus 26 for their etched pavers.
I believe that's for the.
26 and 26.
26.
Yeah.
So it's 50, then 52, or what was it?
50, yeah.
For the whole thing, what
The 52,697 and 28 cents is for the total.
That's for the total.
Yeah,
And
with
what
that.
color did we get on that? I mean, what I don't understand is the 56 or the 26 for the city. And then they had other prices that are a lot higher than that.
Those are for other colors.
for other colors.
All right, so the color that we would get for the 26,000 for the city portion would be that.
That color.
And the whole thing would be
For 50,
so
yeah. The one caveat with that, I talked to some of our maintenance guys, and Jeff knows how that'll happen too, but removing the picnic tables and the benches, there's some sort of understone rod thing, and that was not included in their bid. So we would have to figure
For supporting the picnic table.
supporting.
And that's on the non-inscribed.
Correct.
So do we think there potentially could be additional boats at some time that would want to be engraved? And if engraved, I don't know if I can ask this of Chris. Chris, would you engrave that at the site, or would you have to then pull that particular piece and take it back to your shop and do the engraving?
It's a good question. Hello, everybody. Yes, I would actually pick it up, replace it with a separate one, and do the engraving and then bring it back and replace that one. So we do a swap.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm sticking with the color that Randy picked out. He did a lot of research on this. He did a lot of shopping, got the right pricing. It's what the Fisherman's Club had looked at when they voted to donate the 26,000 and change. So I'm good with sticking with the original proposal, accepting their donation and the city paying the rest just as it was presented. To bring the total up to 52,000 and change.
I agree with that, and I'm wondering if that color seems very similar to what is already there. So would we need to pick up the picnic tables and redo that, or can we leave those pavers where they are and work around them with the replacement, since they won't be etched?
I think that would be like patchwork. And,
Well, that's what I'm wondering, if it would look like patchwork.
and I don't think that the additional cost to do that would be much.
Is that cost within the 56,000?
Yeah, to replace the pavers, but we hadn't discussed putting I think it needs holes drilled in it and put the rod system back underneath it, and that did not include that.
Okay. And how, do we have any idea ballpark how much that is?
Yeah, I mean, there's what, 5, 6 picnic tables there? Four.
And 2 benches.
Oh, and 2 benches. Okay, so yeah, it's gonna be a few $1,000s, I would think, per table.
So
Yes.
Premier Memorial would be doing that work, is that right?
Well, I'm sorry, Chris, I don't know to what extent Premier Memorial actually does this kind of work, other than they supply the material. Is it a different contractor that would be doing the work?
No, we would do the work the same thing. I would have to see how they're actually have been originally attached, and then see what I would, what we could suggest to reattach them. But I would definitely replace it, just because what's underneath, what's there now is concrete. Those are concrete pavers. They're going to wear different than granite pavers. The granite will last. I mean, we can't say forever, but they're going to last way beyond any of our lifetimes and our children's and grandchildren's lifetimes. But the concrete ones, they're like any other concrete, and they're just going to continually wear away and break down. It was just a bad idea to begin with to put those in. Sorry.
I think you just ought to include it in the cost of favors.
So we can have Jennifer and Jeff negotiate that with them.
Yeah,
Um,
to negotiate that, but I'm in full support. I think it's important.
Yeah.
So
Is
I
there
think
any
when it comes to
drawback?
council, I'm sorry, when it comes to council, it should be yes, we accept their donation, and yes, we wanna,
So we would
Jeff
cover
needs
the
to
different.
speak.
Do we have
is
a?
that a consensus?
No, I'd like to hear from Jeff before I agree, because he's over there going.
So, when the city will be getting involved like this, it's not just a donation anymore, it's also, we need to consider it as a public work project. And so we need to make sure that our approach is going to be appropriate. We will likely need to bid, and we will need to have a conversation in a contract. And while I'm sure Mr. Green, your company, Mr. Green, they supplied, granted, I understand there's been some changes in the company, but it was your company that supplied the original concrete stones when it was built a few years ago. Is that correct?
Yeah, I bought that company 3 years ago. I have a parent company called Pacific Coast Memorials. I'm a 4th generation memorialist. So, but yeah, I did purchase that company from another owner 3 years ago.
And that other owner is the one who originally put that material in. So, I mean, there are others around who possibly could bid on it, but we do have to follow a process. So it's not as easy as just saying, here we go, let's move forward. So that's the difference between once we get into having the city's money, own money going into this project.
So we'll have to write plans and specs or a contract?
A contract, yeah, I don't think there'll be much beyond what we've seen here, just a layout and a numbering but there will be, even regardless, even if we're just accepting a donation and just replacing those tiles that have text on them, we would still need to have an agreement of sorts in place, because it's not the city doing the work on city property.
And
It'll
we
just be
have
different.
a time frame for when this will be done and that in this, like, it's not summer when in the middle of the kayak club and everyone else using the pier, right?
Right, yeah, no, we will have to make sure that we control when the work is done. Zoom view platform will have to be closed. Details will have to have conversations and have a good understanding. Is it better to just close the whole thing for a few weeks, take it all out, and then and then put it back in and look at how that will work, but, we'll have to figure that out and get that done.
I think it could be done in 2 days, guys. So, just so you know.
Even if 50% go
Even the
forward.
picnic business,
Even with
coming out,
Betty?
wow.
That
Us
could be
feel that?
done anytime now. Kayakers don't use that viewing platform. 2 days, nothing, I think.
Well, I
In the
think-
summertime, it gets really.
If we wait 6 months, price might go up.
They are honoring an old
Yeah.
price from last fall too.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll have to go out to bid.
I'm pretty sure we'll double check to see what thresholds we have, but I'm pretty sure at this level we will, but yes, we'll check.
And we would want to, so Chris, this is granite, I'm sorry if I'm not using the
Yes.
right.
Yep. No, you got it. You're right.
So you're gonna have this granite that comes from certain lots to make sure that it's matching as well as it can. If we go to another vendor, is it kind of like you and many other people, there's only a few suppliers of this type of granite? Or do we need to account for that in our statement of work if we have to go out to bid?
I mean, there's definitely a few people around that could do the same type of work that I propose. So yeah, but yeah, it does need to be of a good particular granite, and I could give you some good specs that we would use. So
Because we certainly want to match that. Thank you.
Yeah, and one thing, Chris helped me think about, if going with a darker color and whatnot can be too hot. There were all these other considerations of why that one. was
Show
so
the
good.
dirt more.
Yeah.
Does Mr. Babbage have anything to say?
Well, I'd like to say that from my reading that Chris's business is first class, that he's heading fourth generation memorials. And even though you can go elsewhere, I think he'd be hard to find anybody who does quality work. I researched it very well.
So I think we have consensus from council and
Yeah, how does that work with the budget? It's not. Or with Dave?
Jeff will, yeah, Jeff and Dave can
I'm new.
work all that part out, but it'll, yeah. And you can explain it, Jeff, if you like. Right now.
I think that's the best option, is just to talk with Dave about what other funds might be available to pay for this. But I think we can move forward with putting together a donation agreement and then on a parallel track, contract documents, so we can move forward.
All right,
Great, thank you.
thank you so
For your
much.
patience.
Thank you, Chris, for
Thank-
joining us.
you betcha. Thank you guys too.
Your turn. So we have one other item we would like to ask council about off the cuff here. I'm gonna turn it over to City Administrator Knudsen again to talk to you, ask you a question.
So we heard a presentation about a community center. So this is scheduling related. This is not a
Yeah.
decision thing. We've received multiple requests now from the Greater Good Harbor Foundation that they would like to come to council and present to you regarding a senior centered concept or program that they have moving forward for a permanent home for seniors. And so would like to know if that is something that the council would like to see, or if the council would like to say, present at a Monday meeting, or come to us when you have a request, or what you would like us to say.
You got my response?
Councilor Lyons?
Yeah, when is the needs assessment, the comprehensive community needs assessment?
The Penn Map Group they've had 2 meetings so far. And what they're looking at is, they have 3 locations and they collected data at this last meeting about what the steering committee would like. Yes. But their time frame is, you know, they don't know where the funding is, they don't have a contractor. So, but I was thinking with Joe and Gary's presentation, that like fills the gap between when Penn Met could get their show on the road.
The answer is June. They'll have the feasibility study results.
So the needs assessment of where the seniors are, how many are using, what the need is. that they get covered.
Essentially what the feasibility study, as we understand it, will come out with is like how many square footage is needed, what types of services are needed. And then they're looking at specific locations, Penn Met owned properties, potential permanent senior center location.
Are they only looking at Penn Met owned properties specifically?
It's my understanding they've added in our Soundview house into the study.
So this is really just a question to ask if you would like Greater Big Harbor Foundation to come to a study session or a Monday night meeting to present their proposal for what they are working on. That's separate from Penn Met.
So some things to consider are, number one, as this request has come in, we have funding, $200,000 for senior center. However, senior center is not on our current work plan. So having a lot of this work on 2 or 3 different organizations that are wanting us to fund and take time is taking time away from the staff that are needing to get onto our work sessions. Secondarily, as Councilmember Lycan said, Penn Met is doing this feasibility study. And so that information will be forthcoming. As I understand it, the presentation that you received last week, 2 weeks ago, that the 501c3 still has not been approved, and there's other things that they're working through right now. I know that Gary and one person working with him are meeting with Carl on Monday to talk about permitting and how long that would take for the temporary solution. So just
Councilmember Webb, did you have something?
I do. Thank you. I'd like to see everybody who's got a presentation for the senior center. I think I sent that reply to your email today. I don't know when to see that presentation. Should we wait until we get the needs assessment done from Penn Met? But anyone who wants to be involved in the senior center, I think that we should look at their presentation. So I'm happy to see it. Thank you.
Councilmember, I don't know, Robert.
I think it's a good idea to have them present to us at a study session after we hear what Penn Met, because then we'll have a comparison in mind.
That's exactly.
And further to that, I don't think council should get too hung up on the wording in that line item, $200,000 for a permanent home. That's a budget line item that can be amended by council anytime we like.
I don't see the Penn Met feasibility numbers, because that'll identify what the actual need is. But I'm happy to have them present. I would prefer for them to present after we have the data from them.
So Councilmember Lycan, Councilmember Wood says after, what do you say, Mary, before or after?
I would prefer after. And I think it's really important that we get that needs assessment before we make any kind of a decision. And I guess I would ideally like all the parties that are working on this to be able to work together on a single solution, but I'm not sure that that can happen.
I will say that we definitely agree on that, and we have been presenting the city's position in that regard. But again, it's not a city project, so we don't control that.
Right. Councilmember Martin.
Yeah, I would echo what's been said. I think we should wait afterwards. I would like them to present. The good news is we have a group or groups of people wanting to do something for our seniors, and I think that's pretty wonderful. 200,000 is the taxpayers' money. I think we've been very cautious as to when and if and how we choose to go about spending that, but I'm in full agreement. Let's wait till after Penn Met Parks. Please, if you could reach out to the Greater Cape Harbor Group, say, yes, we're gonna have you. We want to wait. until after this is here, and so maybe it's July or August.
I will definitely respond to them today with council's decision. It wasn't really an administrative decision to make, and so that's why we're checking.
Yeah.
Councilor Anderson.
I agree that we should hear stuff after the FS needs assessment. If anybody else presents, I want to see a plan, not just vague things about, well, we have this kind of idea and we might do this, we might do that. It doesn't help us figure out. Somebody's got a plan, kind of like Barbecue 2U did. And that was a relatively solid plan. There's other things we have to look at it, but that would be my ask, is that if they do want to present, not just a feel good thing, I want to see some plans. I want to see, here's what you're going to do, here's your timeline, here's how you're going to do it. Because it sounds like they're working on a kind of a temporary facility as well. And really only Penn Med is the only permanent one.
They're proposing a permanent facility.
That would be in addition to, or?
Yeah, you meant
Penn Med,
temporary.
or-
No, Greater Good Harbor Foundation, I believe, is wanting to present what would be a permanent facility for
That's how I
seniors, not a
understood.
temporary.
All right.
Councilmember Barber. you-
I'm also concerned about the holding up any staff projects for a study session. So I would leave it to you that if this needs to be a separate, or if we need to add a study session so that we don't hold up staff priorities, I think that we should look at that. So,
There is a lot coming up for council.
yeah,
Yes.
and I'm really concerned about that. I don't want this to get in the way of that either.
Councilmember Look, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. So I know that we had talked about perhaps putting a senior project, should we go out for a bond? And I'm guessing that if we don't look at this presentation until after the bond material date is the deadline, does this matter? Are we still thinking about a senior center project or community center project on any potential bond? Where are we there? Can we talk about that?
Yeah, just very briefly, I want to make sure we didn't have this as an agenda item, and so I think perhaps we wait for the full discussion on that, but Jeff and Jennifer are going to be presenting a list for council to look at with costs, and one of those will be the Soundview House. Two options, one that's a renovation for a community space, and one that would be a tear down and rebuild for community space. That will be brought forward for council.
And when is the deadline for the bond material?
I will have to get back to you on that.
Okay,
We are
thank you.
well within the timeframe.
Thank you.
Councilmember Look.
Yeah, just in regards to the Greater Gig Harbor Foundation or anybody else that wants to present, it would be really helpful if they also included not only one-time economic impact, but long-term economic impact in their plans. Because when we're trying to compare A, B, and C, we're not only looking at the initial capital starting money, but also what the long-term impact.
A real performance.
Exactly. And not just, I mean, it's great to see the talking points and the roadshow, but I want to see some numbers because that helps us compare more.
Great. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I'll communicate back to the Greater Gig Harbor Foundation that our preference would be to present after the feasibility study, so council has that. They will, and I will let them know, they always have the option to testify to council at Monday meetings for 3 minutes if they want to share something there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. If there is nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Just want to let you guys know, hot off the presses, that the city was nominated